The following is brought to you by the Starfleet Podcast Network, SPN, The Spin. BigJ's Beef. Let's talk about Klingons today. So I read an article, and by the way, this is Big J, and hopefully you know who this is. You're probably asking yourself, Big J, why are you introducing yourself when we already know who you are? My response to that would be, it doesn't matter. So we're going to talk about Klingons. I read an article a few days ago about the Klingons that were in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 1. So we hadn't seen Klingons in a while, at least in live action. We'd seen them in Lower Decks. But this article talked about the thing that I swear really starts to get on my nerves. Well, it already has. And it was about the look of the Klingons. You can't have any news in Star Trek without it being about Star Trek 4 or the Klingons and how they look in the different series. So let me give you a little bit of background info just for anyone who hasn't kept up with Klingons in Star Trek. So in the 60s, in the original series, we had the Klingons that kind of had this, can't think of a good way to describe their look. Just Google it. The original series Klingons, they had makeup and kind of I don't know what you call it, Fu Manchu sort of mustache. So anyway, we had those Klingons in the 60s for the original series. Fast forward to Star Trek, the motion picture. This is our first view of Klingons with the famous head ridges. Now, at that time, Gene Roddenberry was quoted as saying, the Klingons here in the motion picture were how they were always intended to be and to look like. We just didn't have the budget, which is, of course, obvious. We get it. Cardboard sets, big candy-looking buttons. Klingons didn't have the look that was what was intended, what was planned. So there was another remark made at some point. I believe it was from him. Now, don't quote me on that. I may be saying it wrong or forgetting it wrong, but he made a comment, Gene Roddenberry made a comment about the Klingons we see in the motion picture are like the northern Klingons. The ones in the original series were southern. It might have been flipped or something like that. And what you don't realize is you can't say things like that to a Star Trek fan because we're going to pick it apart and try to find every in-universe explanation for any of this stuff. But okay, that was kind of maybe sort of passable. Fast forward now to the Next Generation, DS9, Voyager. Oh, I'm going to get to DS9 in just a minute. So we have Klingons that have the ridges, look the way that they looked since the motion picture. And the debate on the look of the Klingons going from the original series to Next Generation and so forth was still kind of there, which, in my opinion, why? I don't see why it was. That was obviously explained more than once. So now we go to DS9, and oh boy. So the episode, Trials and Tribulations. This episode was a go back in time, kind of a Forrest Gump, insert ourselves into a past event, past episode. And Worf came along. They go back to the time it's Station K7, where we had an encounter with the Tribbles on that station, and a Klingon informant agent that they had to try to uncover. So they go to the bar on this station, right? And Worf is with Odo and Bashir and O'Brien, and they make note of looking for Klingons and can't find them. Now, again, it's been a while since I've seen the episode, so if I get some minor detail wrong, you have to excuse me. Sorry. But there was a mention said of looking for Klingons, and Worf kind of said, like, there are Klingons over there. And they all look, and we see the Klingons as they were from that episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, back in the 60s. So Bashir, Odo, and O'Brien look at the Klingons with the old style, slowly turn to Worf and say, is there something that you want to tell us? And Worf says, we do not discuss it with outsiders. Oh boy, that was a wrap. That was it. That one line right there hinted at an in-universe explanation behind the look of the Klingons in the original series and the difference that we see in Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, etc. And this started up a big shit show. It really was, in my opinion, because now the problem you have is that's been acknowledged. And the issue that you run into was there was an episode of DS9 that had three Klingons, Kang, Kor, and Koloth. Each one of those was in an episode of the original series. So they go from their look in the 60s, the original series, to now looking like the TNG, DS9, Voyager Klingons. So Worf has said that there is an in-universe reason for this. But how do you reconcile these Klingons that went through both iterations? And there was just, for years, it was discussed, theorized, fan fiction, et cetera, people were losing their minds trying to in-universe explain the difference. So fast forward to Enterprise. Enterprise took place before the original series. So by logic, Enterprise, the Klingons should resemble the Klingons we saw in the original series. Why? Because in DS9, Worf made that canon, it's now canon, that there was a difference, there was a change. So the Klingons we get in Enterprise, of course, are the ones that are from the motion picture forward. That made things worse because how do you go from, and this was all, of course, the fans were just in a complete, they were losing their shit over this. How do you go from this, which is the forehead ridge Klingons, to the original series, like no forehead ridge Klingons, and then back again? Well, it took us until season 4 of Enterprise to get an explanation. And this was, I think, a masterful explanation of this. So there's an episode of Enterprise. It was actually I want to say two-part episode that was based off of an augment episode. And the augments are the same race of, they're the genetically modified people, kind of like Khan, basically Khan and his followers. Well, these augments, a couple of them took out a whole bird of prey complement of Klingons. So they decided to take that technology and develop their own augments, like a Klingon augment. And what happened, just kind of summarize the whole thing, Dr. Phlox, the chief medical officer on the Enterprise, came up with this cure, I want to say, because the augment gene was having and would have a very negative effect on the Klingon populace. So this thing that he did, what happened was, because the augment gene, for lack of a better word, was based off of a human genome. I'm using all these fancy words. I don't even know if it's correct. Just go with me on this. And so then the Klingons started looking like no ridges, kind of like humans. And so what Enterprise did was they took Worf's ill-fated comment about there is this reason why there's a difference, and Enterprise fixed it. I think they did a great job of it. They fixed it. They took something that should not have been explained, should not have been a thing, and they wrapped it up, which I think was great. So then we get to Discovery, the Star Trek Discovery. So this one, let's see, the first season of Discovery took place in, I'd have to look it up, and I want to say 2253-ish, something or another. But basically, in that time, and from the fix that happened in Enterprise, we were supposed to get Klingons that, oh shoot, I'm getting myself all turned around. Technically, they were supposed to, for the most part, not have the ridges. Because if I recall, the thing that made some of the Klingons look human was not the entire population, just a big majority of it. So we kind of take a little bit of a regress back and get these Klingons that are very, and we could say, okay, we could argue that they're the ones that didn't get affected by the whole augment situation. But boy, do they have a lot of prosthetics, makeup, couldn't understand what the hell they were saying, looked crazy. And again, there was all kinds of rip roaring around and controversy and people just losing their shit online about this and how the Klingons didn't look like Klingons. Now, as we got into season 2 of Enterprise, of Discovery, they kind of quickly tried to, let's try to revert this thing. Let's try to gradually get Klingons looking back to what people expected, which I guess we would call the traditional, quote unquote, the traditional look that we've been used to seeing for so long in TNG, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. So we started getting more of that traditional look. Okay, things were kind of a little bit back on track. And then we come to Strange New Worlds, season 2, episode 1, the first appearance of the Klingons in this series. Like I said before, the first time in a while. So getting back to the article, gave you a little background there as to why we're here. So this article was, again, talking about this whole, not so much controversy, but started beating the dead horse again in regards to this. And this is the argument that I've always had. The Klingons are not a homogeneous species. They don't all look alike. And they're not supposed to. They're really not. When you look at the human race, you have all kinds of different looks of humans. Just take Asian, European, Latino, African, you see where I'm getting at. And so we readily accept that on our own planet, we have people that look wildly and crazy different from one another. But for some reason, we don't accept that on the Klingon side. And now I mentioned this in a forum, in a Star Trek forum, the same kind of thing. Why is it that we readily acknowledge that we're different and we have all of our different variations of how humans look, but we don't accept that with the Klingons? And what was said was, well, it's the actual ridges part that is supposed to be like the one thing that's different or supposed to be the same. I don't know. I didn't quite understand the comment that was being made. It would kind of be like if humans were in a show, we were a show, and we were being viewed by an alien species, and they spent most of the time in the show seeing humans being represented by, let's just pick somebody. Let's say humans were always being represented by Asians, by the look of an Asian person, male and female. And then suddenly they see humans being introduced and seeing Africans and being told, yes, they're humans. And the aliens, now bear with me here, the aliens watching the human TV show saying, no, those aren't humans. How can they be? They don't look like that. Same thing, okay? To me, that is the same thing. Is we see this, and we kind of get ourselves in this sort of box where we say, this is how they have to look and how they have to appear. And if there's a difference, then there's some kind of issue or problem with that. But there's not, okay? I think that one of the things we have to remember is that there are different regions. They're different. Klingons look different, okay? From all the different series, it was explained to people. It's there. We've got it. And that's my beef on this one is this topic coming up just as much, if not almost, no, not more, but it seems like it's about as much as the quote unquote Star Trek 4 movie news, which we're never going to get. Next time you see an article about that, just have my voice in your head saying, that's not going to happen. So let's just move on. Well, that's my beef today. Klingons, whether they have ridges or not, who cares? There's lots of different ones. Just watch the show and enjoy it. What the
Where's the beef?
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your ears. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.